You're older than you've ever been, and now you're even older, and now you're even older, and now you're even older. You're older than you've ever been, and now you're even older, and now you're older still. Time is marching on, and time is still marching on. This day will soon be at an end, and now it's even sooner, and now it's even sooner, and now it's even sooner. This day will soon be at an end, and now it's even sooner, and now it's sooner still.
The song Older by They Might Be Giants perfectly demonstrates how many view time. But what is time? Merriam-Webster defines time as a non-spatial continuum that is measured in terms of events which succeed one another from past through present to future. This is how time is predominantly seen in the West, in particular by those who control the structures of society. Yet time is really, to be more precise,
people assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Often these perceptions of time vary vastly depending on what culture an individual identifies with. Oliver Hill states, "Cultural differences in beliefs about time appear to exist between white and black Americans, as well as between black Americans and this particular sample of Africans. The greatest cultural differences concern beliefs about personal time, which now have been found with samples from 4 cultural groups." Hill continues, "Conversely, beliefs about experienced and remembered duration were similar across these groups. Metacognitive awareness of factors that lead to shortened or lengthened duration experiences may be remarkably similar, and therefore beliefs regarding these experiences may represent an edict factor that transcends cultures." So maybe we should look at time not as an event, but as an experience. This is the role time played in many of the novels we read over this semester. In Kindred, Beloved, and Nico Kings, the concept of haunting was explored using the nature and experience of time. The characters in each of these novels dealt with a concept of time that seemed to be antagonistic to their well-being. How this conflict was resolved often helped to develop the overall message. So let's look at the role time plays in each of these stories.
It's been a long time coming. It's going to be a long time gone, and it appears to be a long, appears to be a long, appears to be a long time. It's a long, 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 long time before the dawn.
In Octavia Butler's Kindred, time does not flow linearly. Unlike any sort of conventional haunting, Dana is not haunted by her past, but is instead transported back in time and forced to live through it with her ancestors. In this way, Dana's timeline creates a sort of muddled paradox in which Dana must risk her life in the antebellum South in order to ultimately ensure her own birth. In a way, time itself could be said to haunt Dana. Going back in time and being forced to live through slavery not only affects Dana by making sure she is eventually born, but also by teaching her firsthand the terrors and realities of slavery. At one point early on in the novel, Dana states that she's been watching the violence of this time go by on the screen long enough to have picked up on a few things. However, Over the course of her travels back and forth, Dana comes to realize that nothing could have prepared her for living through the horrors of the time. She is forced to watch in shock as fellow slaves are whipped, beaten, abused, raped, sold, and torn apart from their families. Dana is being haunted by the past by literally living through it and not being able to change it. The knowledge that slavery will eventually come to an end conflicts with her sense of duty to combat the oppressive system that she is witnessing. This conflict is mirrored on a smaller scale by Dana's lineage. She knows that in order for her birth to happen, she must be complacent and even conducive in her great-great-grandfather raping her great-great-grandmother. Over the course of her visits, Dana becomes more and more accepting of these injustices. While this may seem horrific, it is important to keep in mind how easy it is to judge the past when one is fixed in the present. Because time is generally linear, it is easy for most people to make assumptions about the past without worrying about ever having to experience it. By writing an African American woman who gets forced back into a racially charged past, Butler is sending a larger message about time and culture as a whole, that the two are inextricably linked, inescapable, and not easily forgotten.
And in time I will fade away. In time I won't hear what you're saying. In time, but time takes time, you know.
Time plays a particularly interesting role in Toni Morrison's Beloved. The concept of being haunted by one's past is not a new one, and on the surface, the figure of Beloved is Setha's past returning to haunt her. Where this novel is unique, however, is that it is not the direct past that is haunting Setha. Beloved was a child when Setha killed her, but when she returns, she is the age she would have been had she not been murdered. The nature of time in this novel is intrinsically tied to the concept of what Morrison calls rememory. Memory is such a fragile notion, and so often do we relive events only to find we cannot recall the exact order or the exact nature of events transpired. Setha's memories are not only her recalling a past that she tries to remove herself from, it is also a recollection of how things could have gone or what would be if they had been different. Beloved is Setha's guilt and sorrow, but she is also the manifestation of her desire. Time is forever linked with memory, for all we ever know about the past is what can be recalled. This makes the whole concept of the past very fragile and easily altered. Some cultures may be willing to accept this as a truth, yet it is likely to trouble those who look at time as a regimented series of sequential events.
When my time comes,
Leanne Howe's Miko-Kings adds to this complex explanation of time. In her novel, she discusses the nature of Choctaw space and Choctaw time. She uses this concept as a way to tell multiple stories about the experiences of particular moments, yet the voices recounting the events are spread throughout time. This allows for her to tell the stories of the times that one experienced. Easel's character is able to see all the branches of time and how one event or one choice can lead to many others. The history Easel recounts is fluid and able to be altered if those in the present and throughout time begin to understand the true nature of time. Once the characters begin to recognize this nature, they also recognize that their own personal histories can easily become better than what they remember. Lena recognizes that Easel is the grandmother she should have had, and this strengthens her relationship with the time traveler. Hope is able to rectify the horrific actions caused by his fear and selfishness. By revisiting the game which he purposely lost, he was not only able to win it, but also change the history of all Native Americans in baseball, along with establishing greater agency of Native Americans within the United States. His actions created a history that should have happened, and not the terrible one that did. Why look at these different concepts of time and how they affect the individuals within a few fictional novels? According to Cecil Hellman, the Western world's concept of time as linear has been the basis of intellectual and religious thought for many centuries. Joseph Needham saw this as originating in the Judeo-Christian worldview, with its sense of time beginning at the creatio ex nihilo and ending at the second coming, or the coming of the Messiah. Western time was conceived as being directional, advancing, and non-repetitive. All human life was a continuous, linear, redemptive process, and the history of the world was seen as a divine drama enacted on a single stage with no repeat performances. This class is an ethnic literature class, and with that, there should be an expectation of an attempt to learn about the ethnicities which have produced said literature. Time is such a fundamental aspect of the lives of every individual who has ever existed. We would be foolish to allow ourselves to believe that the way we see time in the West, as a constrictive, concrete idea, is the only way time is experienced. With the help of the novels talked about here, readers can come to a broader understanding of what time is, and with that, a greater insight into the fascinating cultures that exist within our neighbors and friends.
There at the gates on the day you were born, spooling his breath through blossoming thought, anointing the head